The bread was still warm in my hands when I decided to give away my last chance at survival. I'm telling you this now because in exactly 3 minutes, I'm going to have to choose between the life I never thought I deserved and the daughter I thought I'd lost forever. But first, you need to understand how a single piece of bread on a frozen December morning in Manhattan destroyed everything I knew about the world and rebuilt it into something I still don't recognize. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Not metaphorically invisible, actually invisible. People looked through me like I was made of glass. On that bench outside Central Park, wrapped in newspapers and shame, I'd perfected the art of disappearing. The faded photograph tucked in my coat pocket, my daughter Lily at age 4, before the accident that took her from me, before I lost everything trying to save what was already gone, that was the only proof I'd ever mattered to anyone. That Tuesday morning, I had $3.47 in coins that had taken me 2 days to collect. Enough for a small loaf of bread from the corner bakery. Enough to survive until Thursday, maybe Friday if I was careful. My stomach had stopped growling months ago. It had given up asking for things I couldn't provide. Then I saw him. A little boy in a navy blue coat that probably cost more than the rent on the apartment I lost 3 years ago. But it wasn't the coat I noticed. It was his eyes. 7 years old, maybe 8, with eyes that looked at me like I was still human, like I was still there. He stood 5 feet away, shivering despite that expensive coat, and I realized 2 things at once. He was hungry, and he was scared to ask. I don't know why I did it. Every survival instinct I developed on these streets screamed at me to protect that bread. But something in his face reminded me of Lily, the way she used to look at me when she needed something but didn't want to be a burden. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I broke the bread in half. "Here," I said. My voice cracked. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 4 days. He took it. And then he smiled. A real smile. The kind that makes you remember what joy looks like. What I didn't see, what I couldn't have possibly known, was the man watching from the black limousine 30 feet away. Daniel Harrington, billionaire, philanthropist, and according to what I'd learned later, a father whose own son had just been given 6 months to live. That little boy's name was Michael, and the bread I gave him wasn't just food, it was a test. 3 days later, I was standing in front of a Fifth Avenue mansion with 23 rooms, holding a handwritten letter that said, "You gave my dying son the only kindness he's received from a stranger in his entire life. I'd like to offer you something in return. Not charity, family." I thought it was a sick joke, or a trap, or one of those reality show pranks where they humiliate homeless people for ratings. It wasn't. Daniel Harrington wanted to adopt me, a 42-year-old homeless woman with a dead daughter, a criminal record for trespassing, and nothing to her name except a backpack and a photograph. He wanted to make me part of his family, give me a room in his mansion, a seat at his table, a second chance I'd stopped believing existed. But here's what nobody tells you about fairy tales. They cost something. Because when I walked into that mansion, I found something that broke me all over again. Hidden in their West Wing library, behind a door I wasn't supposed to open, I discovered why they really wanted me. And it had nothing to do with kindness. In 24 hours, Daniel Harrington's lawyers are going to ask me to sign papers that will change my life forever. They'll offer me everything I've ever wanted, and in return, they'll ask me to do something that will destroy the only piece of my soul I have left. I still don't know what I'm going to choose. This is the story of what happened between that moment on the bench and this moment right now, 3 months later, standing in a marble bathroom wearing a designer dress I don't recognize, staring at a woman in the mirror I don't remember becoming. It's about the lies I uncovered, the family secrets buried in wealth, The impossible bargain that comes with being saved by someone who needs you more than you need them. And it's about the morning I found out my daughter Lily, the child I'd buried 4 years ago, might still be alive. If you've ever wondered whether one choice can rewrite your entire existence, if you've ever been so desperate for love that you ignored the warning signs, if you've ever had to decide between truth and survival, you'll understand why I'm shaking as I type this. Because what I'm about to tell you in the next 10 chapters is going to sound impossible. It's going to sound like fiction, but I swear on the photograph I still carry in my pocket, every single word is true. Hit that like button if you need to know what I found behind that library door. Comment below if you've ever had to choose between saving yourself and finding the truth. Subscribe to this channel because by chapter 3, you're going to understand why I can never go back to who I was before that December morning. And please, whatever you do, don't stop watching until I tell you what they're asking me to sign. My name is Sarah Mitchell. This is my confession. And I have exactly 3 minutes to decide if I'm going to destroy a billionaire family or become part of their darkest secret. The bread was still warm in my hands when I decided to give away my last chance at survival. I'm telling you this now because in exactly 3 minutes, I'm going to have to choose between the life I never thought I deserved and the daughter I thought I'd lost forever. But first, you need to understand how a single piece of bread on a frozen December morning in Manhattan destroyed everything I knew about the world and rebuilt it into something I still don't recognize. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Not metaphorically invisible, actually invisible. People looked through me like I was made of glass. On that bench outside Central Park, wrapped in newspapers and shame, I'd perfected the art of disappearing. The faded photograph tucked in my coat pocket, my daughter Lily at age 4, before the accident that took her from me, before I lost everything trying to save what was already gone, that was the only proof I'd ever mattered to anyone. That Tuesday morning, I had $3.47 in coins that had taken me 2 days to collect, enough for a small loaf of bread from the corner bakery, enough to survive until Thursday, maybe Friday if I was careful. My stomach had stopped growling months ago. It had given up asking for things I couldn't provide. Then I saw him. A little boy in a navy blue coat that probably cost more than the rent on the apartment I lost 3 years ago. But it wasn't the coat I noticed, it was his eyes. 7 years old, maybe 8, with eyes that looked at me like I was still human, like I was still there. He stood 5 feet away, shivering despite that expensive coat, and I realized 2 things at once. He was hungry, and he was scared to ask. I don't know why I did it. Every survival instinct I'd developed on these streets screamed at me to protect that bread, but something in his face reminded me of Lily, the way she used to look at me when she needed something but didn't want to be a burden. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I broke the bread in half. "Here," I said, my voice cracked. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 4 days. He took it, and then he smiled. A real smile, the kind that makes you remember what joy looks like. What I didn't see, what I couldn't have possibly known, was the man watching from the black limousine 30 feet away. Daniel Harrington, billionaire, philanthropist, and according to what I'd learn later, a father whose own son had just been given 6 months to live. That little boy's name was Michael, and the bread I gave him wasn't just food, it was a test. 3 days later, I was standing in front of a Fifth Avenue mansion with 23 rooms, holding a handwritten letter that said, "You gave my dying son the only kindness he's received from a stranger in his entire life. I'd like to offer you something in return, not charity, family." I thought it was a sick joke, or a trap, or one of those reality show pranks where they humiliate homeless people for ratings. I'd been living on the streets long enough to know that when something seems too good to be true, it's usually designed to hurt you worse than if you'd never hoped at all. The letter had been delivered by a man in a pristine gray suit who found me on my bench Tuesday afternoon. He didn't look at me with pity or disgust. He looked at me like I was an appointment on his calendar, professional, detached. He handed me the envelope, said, "Mr. Harrington requests your presence at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening," and walked away before I could ask any questions. I almost threw the letter away. I almost burned it in the trash can fire where I warmed my hands at night. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he'd written family with a capital F. Maybe it was because I had nothing left to lose except the small, stubborn spark of hope I thought I'd extinguished years ago. So I went. I washed my face in the public restroom at Grand Central. I tried to comb my hair with my fingers. I wore the cleanest clothes I had, a donated sweater with only 2 holes, and jeans that didn't smell too bad. I looked like exactly what I was, a homeless woman pretending she belonged somewhere she didn't. The mansion made me want to run. All that marble and gold and crystal, it felt like a museum, not a home. A woman in a black uniform opened the door, and her face remained perfectly neutral, as if desperate homeless women showed up on this doorstep every day. "Mr. Harrington is expecting you in the drawing room," she said. Drawing room? I didn't even know what that meant. I followed her through hallways lined with paintings that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire life. My shoes, donated sneakers with duct tape holding the soles together, squeaked on the polished floors. Each squeak felt like an announcement. "You don't belong here. You don't belong here." Then I saw him, Daniel Harrington, 50-something, silver hair, expensive suit, and eyes that assessed me like I was a business proposition. Michael sat beside him on a cream-colored sofa, eating cookies from a silver tray. When the boy saw me, his face lit up. "That's her, Dad! That's the bread lady!" "Please sit," Daniel said, gesturing to a chair that probably cost more than the car I used to drive before the accident. I sat on the edge, afraid my clothes would stain the fabric. Michael kept staring at me with those bright eyes, munching cookies like we were old friends. "I'll be direct," Daniel began. "My son Michael has acute lymphoblastic leukemia, stage 4. He has approximately 6 months to live, possibly less. We've exhausted every medical option. The treatments have failed. The experimental drugs have failed. We're in the make him comfortable phase now." The words landed like stones. I looked at Michael, who was still smiling, still eating cookies, and my heart cracked open. He was dying. This beautiful child who'd looked at me like I was human was dying. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. It was all I could say. Daniel nodded curtly, as if my sympathy was expected but unnecessary. "What you did for him 3 days ago was significant. Not because of the bread, Michael's not actually hungry, obviously, but because you saw him as a child who needed something, and you gave it without hesitation. You gave him dignity, visibility. In his entire life, surrounded by nannies and tutors and medical staff, no stranger has ever simply been kind to him without an agenda. I didn't know what to say to that. My kindness hadn't been noble. It had been instinct, muscle memory from when I was still a mother." "My wife, Elizabeth, died 2 years ago," Daniel continued. "Cancer. Michael and I have been alone since then. I've hired therapists, grief counselors, child psychologists. Everyone tells me Michael needs maternal comfort in his final months. He needs someone who can provide warmth without clinical detachment, someone who knows what it means to lose everything and still choose kindness." The pieces started clicking together, and I felt cold despite the mansion's expensive heating. "You want to hire me as some kind of companion?" "No," Daniel said. His eyes were sharp, calculated. "I want to adopt you, legally, make you part of this family, give you a home, financial security, medical care. In return, you become Michael's mother figure for whatever time he has left. You give him comfort. You make his final months feel like he has family. I couldn't breathe. Adopt me? I was 42 years old. I was homeless. I had a criminal record. This was insane. I know this sounds unconventional, Daniel said, but I'm offering you everything you need. A room in this house, clothes, food, a monthly stipend. After Michael passes, you'll receive a trust fund, enough to start over completely. Why me? I asked. My voice sounded hollow. Because you understand loss, he said simply, and because you're desperate enough to say yes. Would you accept an offer that could save your life if it meant becoming someone's hired grief? I should have said no. Every shred of self-respect I had left screamed at me to stand up, walk out of that mansion, and never look back. But self-respect doesn't keep you warm when you're sleeping on a bench in December. Self-respect doesn't fill your stomach when you haven't eaten in 2 days. And there was Michael, sweet, dying Michael, who looked at me like I was magic. I kept thinking about Lily. If she were still alive, if she were the one dying, wouldn't I want someone to comfort her? Wouldn't I want someone to make her feel loved in her final days? I need time to think, I said. Daniel shook his head. The offer expires tonight. If you walk out that door, you'll never hear from me again. I have other candidates. Other candidates? Like I was interviewing for a job, which I suppose I was. The job of pretending to be a mother to a dying child while his billionaire father paid me to perform grief. Can I talk to Michael? I asked. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. He stood and left the room, closing the door behind him. Michael immediately scooted closer to me on the sofa, his small face earnest. "Are you going to be my new mom?" he asked. God, the way he said it, so hopeful, so innocent. He had no idea this was a transaction. To him, this was real. "Would you want that?" I asked. "I miss my mom a lot," he said quietly. "Dad tries, but he's always working. And he gets this sad look sometimes, like he can't even see me. But you saw me. At the park, you smiled at me like my real mom used to." I hadn't smiled. I'd been so numb, I could barely feel my own face. But maybe that was enough. Maybe he'd been so starved for genuine human connection that even my deadened kindness felt like love. "What if I said yes?" I asked. "What would you want me to do?" "Just be there," he said simply. "Read me stories, play games, tell me it's going to be okay, even if it's not." His voice cracked. "Everyone treats me like I'm already dead. The doctors, the nurses, even Dad sometimes. They talk around me like I'm not there. But you talked to me at the park. You said here and gave me bread like I was just a regular kid." Tears burned my eyes. I'd been invisible for so long, I'd forgotten other people could be invisible too. Even a dying rich kid in a mansion could be unseen. When Daniel returned, I looked at him with something that might have been hatred or might have been understanding. I couldn't tell anymore. "I'll do it," I said, "but I have conditions." His eyebrow raised. "You're homeless. You don't exactly have leverage." "I do it my way," I said firmly. "I'm not performing for you. If I'm going to be Michael's mother, it's going to be real. I'm going to love him the way he deserves. And when he's gone, you're going to let me grieve like he was mine." Daniel studied me for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "Deal." We shook. His palm was warm, dry, confident. Mine was trembling. They gave me a room on the second floor, down the hall from Michael's. It had a 4-poster bed with silk sheets, a private bathroom with heated floors, and a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my size. Someone, probably Daniel's assistant, had researched me enough to know my measurements. The thought made my skin crawl. I stood in the bathroom for 20 minutes, just staring at the marble countertops and gold fixtures. There was a bathtub the size of my old living room, shelves lined with expensive lotions and perfumes, thick white towels that probably cost more than my weekly food budget used to be. I turned on the faucet and watched the water run clear and hot, something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. When I finally stepped into the shower, I cried. Not from happiness, from disorientation. The water was too clean. The soap smelled too good. My body, visible in the steamed mirror, looked like a stranger's. Ribs protruding, hip bones sharp, scars from sleeping rough. This wasn't transformation, this was camouflage. After, I put on the silk pajamas laid out on the bed and tried to sleep. But the mattress was too soft. The room was too quiet. I was used to sirens and shouting and the constant awareness that someone might hurt me while I slept. This silence felt dangerous in a different way, like it was waiting to swallow me whole. Around midnight, I heard crying, soft, muffled sobs coming from down the hall, Michael's room. I got up before I could think better of it and found his door slightly open. He was curled up in bed, clutching a stuffed elephant, tears streaming down his face. "Hey," I whispered, stepping inside. "Can't sleep?" He looked up, startled, then nodded. "My stomach hurts, and I keep thinking about my mom. She used to sing to me when I felt bad." I sat on the edge of his bed, and without planning it, I started humming. I didn't know what song. Maybe something I used to sing to Lily, maybe something my own mother sang to me. It didn't matter. Michael's breathing slowed, his grip on the elephant loosened. "Will you stay?" he asked sleepily. "Yeah," I said, "I'll stay." I sat there for 2 hours watching him sleep, and something inside me that had been frozen for years began to thaw. This wasn't fake. Whatever Daniel's intentions were, whatever twisted arrangement this was, Michael's need was real. His pain was real. And maybe, just maybe, I could do some good before this all fell apart. Because it would fall apart, I knew that. Happy endings didn't happen to people like me. But for now, in this quiet room with this dying child, I could pretend I was a mother again. I could pretend I was someone worth saving. The door creaked. I looked up to see Daniel standing in the doorway, watching us. His expression was unreadable. Not quite approval, not quite suspicion. He nodded once and disappeared. I realized then that I was being evaluated. This whole thing was a performance, and I was on probation. When I finally returned to my room as dawn broke, I found an envelope on my pillow. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a note. First month's stipend. Bank account information attached. Welcome to the family. I held that check until my hands stopped shaking. Then I put it in the drawer and tried to remember who I used to be before I learned to trade dignity for survival. When does accepting help become accepting betrayal? And how do you know the difference before it's too late? The first 2 weeks passed in a strange blur of routine. I woke up, I had breakfast with Michael, we read books, played board games, watched movies. I learned his favorite color was green. His favorite food was grilled cheese cut into triangles. He was afraid of the dark, but too proud to admit it, so I started leaving his bathroom light on and pretending it was my idea. Daniel was almost never there. He left early for his office and returned late, often after Michael was already asleep. When he was home, he observed us from a distance, standing in doorways, watching silently, making notes on his phone. It felt like living in an aquarium. I started to understand why Michael felt invisible. His own father barely looked at him. But I looked at him. I saw him. And slowly, achingly, I started to love him. Not because I was being paid to, though the money hit my new bank account like clockwork every Friday. Not because he reminded me of Lily, though sometimes the resemblance was so sharp it took my breath away. I loved him because he was Michael, because he was funny and smart and brave in the face of something no child should ever have to face. The house staff treated me like I was contaminated. The cook, Mrs. Chen, never spoke to me directly. The cleaning staff avoided eye contact. Daniel's personal assistant, a cold woman named Rebecca, made it clear I was temporary help, not real family. "Don't get too comfortable," she told me once, passing me in the hallway. "You're here to serve a function. When Michael's gone, so are you." I tried not to think about that, about after, about the trust fund Daniel had promised and what it would mean to profit from a child's death. Instead, I focused on now, on making Michael smile, on reading him one more chapter, on pretending this was real. Then one afternoon, while Michael napped, I got lost. The mansion was enormous, 23 rooms, Daniel had said, but I think he'd undercounted. I was looking for the kitchen when I took a wrong turn and found myself in an unfamiliar wing, the West Wing. The door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar. I should have walked away. I should have turned around and gone back to Michael's room, but something drew me forward. Maybe it was the feeling that I was being lied to. Maybe it was the way Daniel watched me too carefully, like he was waiting for me to discover something. I pushed the door open. It was a library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs, a mahogany desk. And on that desk, spread out like evidence, were files. Medical files, legal documents, and photographs. My hands shook as I picked up the first photograph. It was Michael, but younger, maybe 4 or 5. He was holding hands with a woman, but it wasn't Elizabeth Harrington, whose portrait hung in the main hallway. This woman had dark hair and warm eyes and a smile that made my chest tight. She looked like she was laughing at something Michael had said. I flipped the photo over. Written on the back in faded ink, Michael and Sarah, his birth mother, 2019. Sarah? His birth mother was named Sarah? I dropped the photograph like it was burning. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this. Daniel had never mentioned that Michael was adopted. He'd talked about Elizabeth dying, about Michael needing a mother figure, but he'd never said... I grabbed the medical file, flipped through pages of doctor's notes, and there it was, buried in the paperwork. Patient Michael Harrington, adopted 2020. Birth mother Sarah Mitchell. Parental rights terminated due to... Sarah Mitchell. That was my name, my full name. I couldn't breathe. The files slipped from my hands, papers scattering across the desk. Sarah Mitchell. My name. But that couldn't be. Michael wasn't mine. Lily was mine. Lily had died 4 years ago in the accident that destroyed my life. Lily was... I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and pulled up the photo I kept in my digital files, the only one that had survived my years on the streets. Lily at age 4, smiling at the camera, her green eyes bright with joy. Green eyes, like Michael's. I looked at the photograph on the desk again. The woman holding Michael's hand had dark hair, like mine used to be, before malnutrition turned it brittle and gray. She had the same narrow nose, the same slight overbite. "Looking for something?" Daniel's voice came from behind me, and I spun around. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Who is this woman?" I demanded, holding up the photograph. "Why does she have my name?" "Because she is you, Sarah." He stepped into the library, closing the door behind him. "Or rather, you were her, 4 years ago, before the accident, before the addiction, before you lost custody and forgot you ever had a son." The room tilted. "No, I had a daughter, Lily. She died." "Lily was your daughter from your first marriage," Daniel said calmly, like he was explaining a business merger. "Michael is your son from your second marriage, to me. We were married for 3 years. You don't remember because of the traumatic brain injury you sustained in the car accident, the same accident that killed Lily." I backed away from him until I hit the bookshelf. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. "You're lying." "Am I?" He opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out a marriage certificate. Sarah Mitchell and Daniel Harrington, married June 2018. A photograph of us at the wedding. Me in a white dress, smiling at a man I didn't recognize. Another photo, me pregnant, Daniel's hand on my swollen belly. Another, me in a hospital bed holding a newborn baby with a little tuft of dark hair. Green eyes, like Michael's. I looked at the photograph on the desk again. The woman holding Michael's hand had dark hair, like mine used to be, before malnutrition turned it brittle and gray. She had the same narrow nose, the same slight overbite. Looking for something? Daniel's voice came from behind me, and I spun around. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Who is this woman?" I demanded, holding up the photograph. "Why does she have my name?" "Because she is you, Sarah." He stepped into the library, closing the door behind him. "Or rather, you were her, 4 years ago, before the accident, before the addiction, before you lost custody and forgot you ever had a son." The room tilted. "No, I had a daughter. Lily, she died." "Lily was your daughter from your first marriage," Daniel said calmly, like he was explaining a business merger. "Michael is your son from your second marriage, to me. We were married for 3 years. You don't remember because of the traumatic brain injury you sustained in the car accident, the same accident that killed Lily." I backed away from him until I hit the bookshelf. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. "You're lying." "Am I?" He opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out a marriage certificate. Sarah Mitchell and Daniel Harrington, married June 2018. A photograph of us at the wedding. Me in a white dress, smiling at a man I didn't recognize. Another photo, me pregnant, Daniel's hand on my swollen belly. Another, me in a hospital bed, holding a newborn baby with a little tuft of dark hair. "The accident happened when you were driving both kids to school," Daniel continued, his voice clinical, detached. "A drunk driver hit you head-on. Lily died instantly. You and Michael survived, but you had a severe head injury. When you woke up, you remembered Lily, but not Michael, not me, not our marriage, not any of the 5 years we spent together." My legs gave out. I slid down the bookshelf until I was sitting on the floor, the photographs scattered around me like evidence of a life I'd stolen from someone else. "The doctor said the memories might never come back," Daniel said. "The brain protects itself from trauma by erasing what's too painful to remember. You remembered Lily because losing her was the trauma. You forgot Michael because," he paused, "because keeping him alive meant remembering you'd killed your daughter." "No." The word came out broken. "No, no." "You had a breakdown," he continued mercilessly. "Started drinking, pills. You attacked me when I tried to get you help. The court terminated your parental rights. Michael was 2 years old. I was granted sole custody. You disappeared into the system. I spent 3 years looking for you. I spent 3 days locked in my room, refusing to come out. Daniel had staff leave food outside my door, but I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop staring at the photographs he'd given me. Evidence of a life I didn't remember, a child I'd forgotten, a husband I'd erased. Michael came to my door every few hours, knocking softly. 'Sarah, are you okay? Please come out. I miss you.' Each time, I pressed my hand against the wood and said nothing, because what could I say? I'm sorry I forgot you existed. I'm sorry I was too broken to remember being your mother." On the 4th day, Daniel knocked. Not soft like Michael, hard, demanding. "We need to talk," he said through the door. "I'm coming in whether you unlock it or not." I let him in. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not calculation, grief. "I didn't want to tell you this way," he said quietly, sitting in the chair across from my bed. "I'd hoped being around Michael would trigger your memories naturally. The bread incident, I didn't stage that. Michael wandered off from his nanny that morning. When I found him, he was talking about the nice lady who shared her food. I had my people track you down, and when I saw it was you," he exhaled, "I thought it was fate, a chance to bring you back to us before he died." "You manipulated me," I whispered. "The adoption story, the dying son needing a mother figure. You lied." "I simplified," he corrected. "Michael is dying. That's true. He does need you. That's also true. I just didn't tell you that you were already his mother, because you weren't ready to know. And now, I asked bitterly, now I'm ready? Now that you've destroyed what little sanity I had left? Now you have a choice, Daniel said, standing. He placed a folder on the bed. Inside are 3 documents. The first is a legal petition to restore your parental rights. The second is a contract terminating our arrangement. You'll get the trust fund and you can leave. The third is Michael's updated medical report. He has 6 weeks, maybe less. 6 weeks. My son, and he was my son, even if I couldn't remember giving birth to him, had 6 weeks to live. I opened the medical file with shaking hands. The cancer had spread. His organs were failing. The hospice recommendations said to make him comfortable, give him joy, let him go peacefully. If I restore my parental rights, I said slowly, what happens? You become his legal mother again, Daniel said. You make the medical decisions. You're listed as next of kin. When he dies, you inherit half my estate, about $400 million. He paused. But it also means accepting that you forgot him, that you abandoned him, that for 2 years of his life, he thought his mother didn't want him. The guilt was acid in my throat. Why are you giving me this choice? You could just keep things as they are. Because Michael knows, Daniel said quietly. He figured it out 3 days ago when he heard us arguing. He knows you're his birth mother, and he asked me if you were going to leave again. But there was something Daniel wasn't telling me. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened when I asked about the West Wing library. Why do you keep these files in there? I'd asked. Why not in your office? Why a secret room? He'd deflected, changed the subject, and that deflection told me everything I needed to know. There was more, something he hadn't revealed yet, something that would change the equation again. That night, after Michael fell asleep, and I'd started sitting with him again because how could I not, I went back to the library. This time, I searched systematically. Desk drawers, filing cabinets, the safe hidden behind a portrait of Elizabeth Harrington. The safe combination was Elizabeth's death date. Apparently, Daniel wasn't creative with his passwords. Inside, I found more files. And these changed everything. Medical reports, not Michael's, mine, from right after the accident. The traumatic brain injury, yes, but also something else. Blood tests, toxicology reports, and a police report I'd never seen before. According to the official story, I'd had a breakdown after the accident, started using drugs, became violent. The court records showed I'd tested positive for methamphetamine, that I'd attacked Daniel during a supervised visit, that I'd been deemed a danger to my son. But these blood tests, the ones from the hospital immediately after the accident, showed no drugs in my system. These tests were dated a week before the court hearing, before I'd allegedly become an addict. I kept reading, found a letter from a doctor at a private psychiatric facility. It was addressed to Daniel, dated 4 years ago. As discussed, the treatment to suppress traumatic memories has been successful. The patient no longer recalls the son as intended. However, I must express my ethical concerns about proceeding without her consent. If she ever recovers these memories naturally, the psychological damage could be catastrophic. I recommend full disclosure and voluntary participation in any future therapeutic interventions. I read it again and again. The treatment to suppress traumatic memories. Without her consent, Daniel had done this to me, deliberately. He'd hired someone to erase Michael from my mind, then testified in court that I was an unstable drug addict. He'd taken custody of our son by destroying my memories and my credibility. But why? What could possibly motivate someone to do this to their own wife? I found the answer in the last file, Elizabeth Harrington's death certificate. Cause of death, acute organ failure due to poisoning. And clipped to it, a private investigator's report. Evidence suggests poisoning was not accidental. Source likely someone with regular access to victim's medication. Primary suspect, Sarah Mitchell Harrington. Insufficient evidence for prosecution. Family requested no police investigation. They thought I'd killed Elizabeth, Daniel's second wife, Michael's stepmother, the woman he'd married a year after erasing me from Michael's life. And now that Elizabeth was dead, now that Michael was dying, Daniel had brought me back. Not out of kindness, not to reunite a mother and son, but to transfer his guilt, to make me the villain of this story, to ensure that when Michael died, I would be the one left holding the blame. The papers on the bed, the choice he'd given me, suddenly made perfect sense. If I restored my parental rights, I became legally responsible for Michael's end-of-life care. Any decisions about pain management, life support, when to stop treatment, those would be on me. And if Michael died while I was his legal mother, Daniel could revive the Elizabeth investigation, point to the pattern, suggest I had a history of harming people I supposedly loved, destroy me all over again. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his face dark with anger when he saw the open safe, the scattered files. "You weren't supposed to find those," he said quietly. "Did you kill Elizabeth?" I asked, my voice steady despite the terror coursing through me. "Did you poison her and frame me for it?" He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Elizabeth was dying anyway. Cancer, like I told Michael. The poison just accelerated the timeline, made her death look suspicious, made it look like something you might have done if you'd still been around. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why destroy me? Why erase our son from my memory?" "Because you were going to leave me," Daniel said, and for the first time I heard real emotion in his voice, rage, possession. "After Lily died, you blamed me, said if I hadn't been working late, if I'd been there to drive them to school, she'd still be alive. You wanted a divorce. You were going to take Michael and disappear. I couldn't let that happen. So you erased me instead." "I saved him from you," Daniel corrected. "You were falling apart. The grief was destroying you. You would have dragged Michael down with you. I gave him stability. Elizabeth was a good stepmother. He was happy. Until you killed her, too." His jaw tightened. "Elizabeth was weak. She started asking questions about your disappearance, threatened to go to the police. She had to go. Just like you have to make a choice now, Sarah. Sign the parental rights restoration, take your place as Michael's mother for his final weeks, and inherit everything when he dies. Or refuse, walk away, and I'll make sure the world knows you abandoned your dying son twice." "That's not a choice," I whispered. "That's extortion." "That's love," he said, and the delusion in his voice made my skin crawl. "I never stopped loving you, Sarah. I brought you back because Michael deserves his real mother, and because I deserve my real wife. After Michael is gone, we can start over, just the two of us, the way it was supposed to be." He was insane, completely, dangerously insane, and I was trapped in his house with my dying son down the hall, and no one who would believe me if I tried to tell the truth. "I need time to think," I said, the same words I'd used weeks ago when this nightmare began. "You have until morning," Daniel said. "Choose wisely, Sarah, because this time there are no other candidates." Which brings me back to now. 3 minutes. That's how long I have left before Daniel's lawyers arrive to witness my signature on one of those 3 documents. 3 minutes to decide if I'm going to restore my parental rights and become legally responsible for Michael's death. 3 minutes to decide if I'm going to take the money and run, leaving my son to die thinking I abandoned him again. 3 minutes to decide if I'm going to stay and fight a billionaire who's already proven he can erase me whenever he wants. Michael is asleep in his room, finally peaceful after weeks of increasing pain. He doesn't know I spent last night copying every file from that library, uploading them to a cloud server Daniel doesn't know exists. He doesn't know I called the one person I thought might help me, a detective who'd been investigating Elizabeth's death before the family shut it down. He doesn't know that in 2 hours, police will arrive with a warrant for Daniel's arrest, that the evidence I've compiled, the medical records, the private investigators' reports, the letter from the psychiatric facility, will finally bring the truth to light. But none of that matters if I can't face Michael first, if I can't look him in the eyes and tell him who I really am, who I was before his father broke me, who I'm trying to become again. I walk down the hallway to his room. The morning light filters through the windows, making everything look softer than it is. Daniel is in his study, waiting for my decision. He doesn't know I've already made it. Michael stirs when I sit on his bed. His green eyes, my eyes, open slowly. "Sarah," he whispers, "you came back." "I never left," I tell him, and it's both a lie and the deepest truth I know. "Michael, there's something I need to tell you, something your dad should have told you a long time ago." "I already know," he says quietly. "You're my real mom, the one from before." "Yes," I say, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry I forgot you. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry for everything." "It's okay," he says, and his small hand reaches for mine. "You're here now. That's what matters." We sit like that for a long time, holding hands, neither of us saying what we both know, that here and now is all we're going to get, that 6 weeks is probably optimistic, that every moment from this point forward is borrowed time. "I signed the papers," I tell him finally. "You're my son. Legally, officially, forever. Nothing is going to take me away from you again." He smiles, and it's the same smile from that December morning at the park, the smile that saved my life by reminding me I was still human, still capable of love, still someone's mother. "Will you stay?" he asks. "Even after?" "Even after," I promise, though I don't know if I'm talking about after he dies, or after the police take Daniel away, or after the whole truth comes out and the world knows what happened to us. Downstairs, I hear car doors slamming, raised voices, Daniel shouting. The detective I called has arrived early. Everything is about to change again. But up here, in this quiet room with my son, I've already made the only choice that matters. I choose him. I choose truth. I choose whatever time we have left, even if it destroys me, even if the money disappears, even if I end up back on the streets when this is over. Because I was wrong about happy endings. They're not about everything working out perfectly. They're not about getting rich or getting revenge or getting vindication. They're about finding the one thing that makes you remember why you survived in the first place. For me, that thing is the boy holding my hand, asking me to read him one more chapter. So I open the book on his nightstand, Where the Wild Things Are, his favorite, and I start reading. And for these last few minutes before the police come, before Daniel's world falls apart, before the impossible future becomes the unbearable present, we're just a mother and her son sharing a story. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's everything I have. And I'm giving it freely this time. No tests, no conditions, no transactions. Just love. Finally. At last. If this story made you feel something, anger, grief, hope, anything at all, please hit that like button. Comment below and tell me, would you have chosen differently than Sarah? Would you have signed those papers or walked away? Subscribe to this channel because there are more stories like this one. Stories about people who survive impossible things, people who find love in the wreckage, people who refuse to stay broken even when the world keeps trying to break them. Sarah's story isn't over. There's still the trial, the investigation, Michael's final days, the question of whether she'll actually inherit anything or end up back on the streets, and the biggest question of all, when they excavate the truth about Elizabeth Harrington's death, what else will they find buried in that mansion? Stay with me, because the truth is always more complicated than the fairy tale. And sometimes, the only way out is through. This is Sarah Mitchell's confession. This is what happens when a homeless woman shares her bread and gets adopted by a billionaire family. This is the story of what it costs to be saved by someone who's trying to save themselves. Thank you for witnessing it.